Welcome back to the Mr. Cool Mug podcast. In our last episode, we discussed the movie Joker. Maybe not the last episode, but maybe the previous episode. They're all sort of flowing together. Anyway, we lambasted the Joker. We came out against the Joker. We said the problem with the Joker, the reason why the Joker is a Hollywood movie, the motivation, the propagandistic motivation behind making the movie Joker. There are many different motivations, perhaps stereotyping white men as domestic terrorists, stereotyping white men as mentally ill, crazed freaks, whatever. But I said, really, other than scaring people of color, other than scaring women, other than scaring the bourgeoisie and creating a reactive force which can be used against Republicans or something like that, I said, really, the movie is intended to reach a white male audience and to tell these white men, you can just rebel as a mob. You can just get out in the streets, and you can have another Battle of Berkeley, and you can have another Charlottesville, and that will empower you, and that will resurrect you and give you a rebirth and a new identity. And we know, from what happened in Charlottesville, we know that's not a good idea. So the people who are promoting this movie as their movie, I guess I have to disagree with those people. It's not my movie. But then I saw some boomer takes, and the boomer takes were essentially, past all of the typical left-wing takes. Oh, the movie is provoking gun violence. The movie is glorifying mental illness. The movie is promoting toxic white masculinity. All of these typical leftist takes, we can just ignore those, put those on the shelf for later, and just understand, yes, of course, they're right and true and just, and the mainstream is always correct. And we're just going to put that on the shelf for the moment. And we're going to address the, unique boomer take, which I think really gets to the psychology, this intergenerational divide, where I see this movie review, and to boil it down for you, I think it's emblematic of a certain intergenerational attitude divide, where the Joker is said to be not compelling as a character because the Joker is not charismatic. The Joker is a loser. The Joker is not someone you sympathize with. The Joker is just this humiliating sack of nothingness. He has no swag. If we look at Heath Ledger, and I did go back and I rewatched some of the clips of the Heath Ledger performance in The Dark Knight, and Heath Ledger has swag. He has stage presence. He has a kind of a movement to him. He has a whimsical movement. He has a power. He has a ferocity. You fear him. You're impressed by him. There's almost a, dare I say, there's a kind of romantic tension, I think, between the audience and the Joker, where he's the bad boy. He's the dark triad. He's a sociopath. He's a psychopath. He's a killer. He's a predator. And we see this animalistic power behind him and this force of chaos. And his genius, his Machiavellian genius, he has all these plans and plots and they come together perfectly. And this devil-may-care attitude. He has no fear. He's not a fearful man. He laughs in the face of death. So there's clearly a charisma behind the Heath Ledger character. There's clearly something compelling there. And when you compare Heath Ledger to the Arthur Fleck character, it's true, Arthur is a loser. He never really accomplishes anything. Everything he does is sort of accidental. He has no agency. He intends to do one thing and then he does another thing. There's clearly a lot to criticize there. But what I think the boomer take misses is he is an anti-hero or an anti-villain. He's kind of transcending the Taxi Driver, as we spoke about. We said that in Taxi Driver, the protagonist or the anti-hero, whatever, the main character, in the end, he saves a prostitute's life, and that is the redeeming light at the end of the tunnel, the silver lighting to the whole story. Or say in Fight Club, at the end, he holds the hand of his crush. And he discovers who he truly is and his identity. Even as the buildings are falling, there's a silver lighting there. The Joker doesn't really have that, and I guess the boomer take is it descends into Bolshevism and communism, and we get that, we understand that, we've criticized that to an extent. But I think there is a lack of recognition of the cathartic element in the loserdom of the movie. And I did have a video a while ago, which, we never know where we stand in terms of fair use and things of that nature. So, maybe at some point someone we can re-upload that or something like that. But there was a clip I put up which talked about the song Creep. I think it's by 9 Inch Nails. And the song Creep, it's like, I'm a creep, I'm a loser, what am I doing here, I don't belong here. And there, a black guy is talking about how white people love this song, and there's something that it hits the soul of white people to just wallow in this self-pity, I'm a loser, I'm a creep. And I think that the Joker, in a sense, is Creep as in a film form, it's an adaptation of the song Creep into a full-length feature film. And I think that really appeals to young people. And if you're going through high school, you're going through college, you're going through university, as a white man, you're experiencing all these little slights and humiliations. If someone says, oh, white men are lame, or I hate white men, or uses the phrase dead white men as kind of a pejorative, then what is the response? There is no response. You can't say, well, I hate white women because that's misogynistic. You can't say, well, I hate men of color because that would be racist. You can't be violent in your reaction because then that would violate the non-aggression principle. So what can you do? What is your response? Well, it's nothing. You're silent, you contain yourself, you contain your resentment, you contort your facial features a little bit, and you just kind of keep it down on the inside. Or you have like a lofty, oh, well, that's not me, they're not talking about me, they're just talking about those poor white people, or those racist white people, or those rednecks, those Republicans, whatever. But there's some kind of cope, there's some kind of restraint of that resentment. You can never act out in a kind of catharsis because any kind of response you would give, you either have to nod and agree and amplify, or you have to retreat and in the same way that Arthur is constantly laughing, he has to hide his laughter, he has to contain his laughter. We have to contain our response to that sort of thing. To do otherwise is to go outside the bounds of what is socially acceptable. And that is a kind of insanity. Sanity is defined by that behavior which is socially acceptable. So to step outside that is to be insane. So I think there is an identification there where people, when they talk about Joker mode, of course there is a violent implication there. But it's also just about stepping outside the bounds of sanity, because currently there is no option. There is no response. You cannot give a response to that sort of thing. There is no socially acceptable response. So we're looking at that, and I think one of the most important scenes in the film for me, and probably the highlight of the film, and I don't think you can outdo this scene. I think it sort of all goes downhill from there, where it never quite reaches the concentrated effect of the first scene. You can say the film is disgusting, and I understand that. And I'm not someone to watch a lot of surrealist film, but when I am exposed to surrealist film, I say, okay, well, this is disgusting, this is revolting, this is unsettling, this is unheimlich is the German term. This is unnatural, right? We can say that about certain surrealist films. French surrealist films, made by Polish, Jewish, Algerian producers or whatever. We can say that, but we can say it's effective. We can say that it is not accidental that we are feeling disgusted, but rather it is the intention of the artist to create this feeling of unsettlement, of disgust, and so on. So we can say that really this is effective artwork, and many artwork is in this vein. I think that's how we have to understand the power of the Joker. Even though, again, I lambast it, I condemn it, I disavow, I say the Joker's not a good movie, don't support it, don't fund it, don't see it, whatever. But I think there is a power, I think there is an attraction to the younger generations who they feel like there are all these internal, passive-aggressive, institutionalized, bureaucratized slights and humiliations against them, and they can't react. They have no ability. They can't say, hey, look what they're doing to us, because everything is so blue empire, Juvenalian, maybe is an adjective, but it's sort of hidden and it's layered and it's intellectualized and it's so embedded in the culture that you can't say, look at this, look at what's happening. And so people don't understand there's not a matchup between what is happening in the external world of material reality and then the internal world of the psychological reality. And the first scene for me really is an externalization of what I think a lot of people feel internally. And it's hard to justify because you sound stupid. And you sound like you're self-pitying. You sound like you're making yourself into a victim. If you say, well, I feel like I walk outside and people are making fun of me, people are beating me up, people are humiliating me. Oh, not physically, I can't file a police report. I don't have any valid complaint. There's no method of recourse. But this is how people can feel. And so that first scene where he is already in a state of humiliation. He's already in a clown costume. He has this sign, I think it's everything must go, going out of business. He is employed. His employment is this just temporary, it's basically the lowest of the low. He's not even sweeping the streets. If he was sweeping the streets, that could be constructive, it could be beautifying, it could be making the city a better place to live in. But he's not doing that. He's participating in this degradation. It's possibly the worst job that you can see. It's already, we're at the lowest of the low, rock bottom. And when you thought it couldn't get any worse, this ethnically ambiguous gang of kids, youths, comes after him, takes his sign, beats him over the head with the sign, beats him up. I mean, that to me is like, you've already caught the interest, right? Even if my message is ultimately the movie is for a bad purpose. The movie is, you're watching the movie. For instance, I don't think it was as good as Blade Runner. And maybe I just don't understand the subversive element of Blade Runner, how Blade Runner is trying to, maybe it's trying to tell people, you should sacrifice yourself, or I don't know what the message there is. But I found less reason to condemn Blade Runner. I'm not saying Hollywood can't make a movie that I won't go see. I went and saw Blade Runner. But I'm saying, I'm taking the radical centrist take right here. I'm saying the Joker's not my movie. I don't agree with the message. I don't agree with the framing. But at the same time, I see why people like it. I see why people say, that's it. That's what I feel on a daily basis. I feel like a gang of kids. I'm in a clown costume, right? That is the performatism of social interaction. I have to dress myself up in a clown costume for whatever it is, school, work, whatever social situation. You have to pretend to be something you're not. You have to put on a smile when you don't feel good. And you're selling a product is worthless. The business is dying, and you have to hold up this sign, everything must go. You're trying to sell something internally, what you're trying to sell, whether it's a job interview where you're selling your skills, whether you're literally selling a product or something like that. All of this salesmanship, we live in this advertising culture, and we know that what we're advertising is of less worth than what we're trying to sell it for. We know we're in this constant, we're scamming each other all the time. It's this scam culture. So everyone feels that way, and then you're just doing what you're told. You're just doing it to get by, to make a living, to make a little bit of money, to find a little comfort for yourself. And then this metaphorical youth gang comes after you and steals your sign and smashes you over the head and kicks you on the ground. And that doesn't actually happen a whole lot in real life. In real life, most people are not assaulted by gangs of criminals. Some people are. I would say black people are probably far more likely to be in that kind of a situation where they're just randomly attacked by a gang, because black people happen to live in high crime neighborhoods. So really, the people who probably are most regularly victims of violent crime, in my opinion, maybe I think the statistics support me, but I think it's black people. I think young black people, young black men, young black women are much more regularly victims of violent crimes, theft, robbery, assault, just random beatings from, random people. I think it's going to be, black people are going to be victims more often of that violent crime. And I think it's not to say white people are never victims of crime, but it's rare. It is not a common everyday occurrence. It is not something that most white people experience in their lives. But I think there's almost a hidden secret wish, like a death wish, a wish that these internal feelings that people have of humiliation could somehow be externalized so that people could finally understand what you're feeling. And you would say, aha, look, I'm not just making it up. I'm not making a big deal out of nothing. I'm not crying over a few words like dead white. Who cares if someone uses the phrase dead white men? I mean, it's just a phrase. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me. This mentality inhibits people from feeling that they have any recognition, from feeling that their hurts are being seen. And so when we see Arthur being physically assaulted, we feel, aha, this is an externalization of internal humiliation. And, this continues throughout the movie and goes on and on. There's a lot of different things you could look at. You could look at how he has, like, a fantasy girlfriend, and then she just disappears out of the air, and then all of a sudden she's like, what are you doing in my apartment? Now, within the reality of the movie, you could say, well, that's a perfectly rational response. This woman clearly has never interacted with this guy in any way. He has this fantasy that she's his girlfriend, and then he walks into the apartment, she's like, what is this guy? Maybe he's here to hurt me. He's a mentally ill guy. But if you kind of take it on a deeper level, is this not the phenomenon of no-fault divorce, which affects a majority of Americans at this point? I mean, if you look at different maps of the world, it's pretty much the Western world as well as Russia. Russia has huge, divorce, very high divorce rates. The only countries that really don't have a huge divorce rate are like Middle Eastern Muslim countries. Everyone else is doing pretty badly, and you look at this divorce rate, concept of no-fault divorce, and so in a way we understand, yes, Arthur, he's a crazy guy. Clearly her reaction is reasonable on the level of reality as we understand it within the context of the movie. But look at it from Arthur's perspective, and I think this is a perspective that a lot of people are starting to be hit by, whether it's a legitimate perspective or just or whatever. I'm just talking about the internal psychology of people, how they feel when you've been married to a woman, and maybe it was 5 years, maybe 10 years, 20 years, and then one day you walk into the house and she says, well, I'm just not in love with you anymore. I don't even know who you are. You've changed as a person. And this flippant lack of loyalty, lack of solidity, lack of foundational relationship. It's just this, well, my capricious feelings and passions were there yesterday and they're no longer here today. And so that phenomenon of walking into a house and having the woman of the house tell you to get out, that she's afraid of you. Of course, we recognize at that point Arthur has no desire to hurt this woman. We know who Arthur is. He's not someone who wants to hurt this woman. He's not there to hurt people who have done nothing wrong to him. He is not a sadist. He's not a predator. But she is accusing him of being a predator. She is accusing, oh, I'm afraid. I fear for my safety. And there's a little clip, I forget. It's actually a Republican woman, a Hispanic Republican woman, I think from New Jersey, got pulled over by the cops. And for like 30 minutes, she's just shrieking, I don't feel comfortable, I don't feel safe, I want a female police officer, as if the police officers are trying to like sexually assault her or something like this. It's a script that we're seeing promoted, Me Too movement, things like that. It's a script that's promoted. Of course, guys like Harvey Weinstein get away with that sort of thing for decades, or guys like Anthony Weiner have that attitude and they get high positions in politics. People like Roman Polanski, oh, well, he's an artist or whatever. People make excuses for certain types of people. But if you're Arthur Fleck, then you don't even have to do anything. You don't even have to try to do anything wrong, and you're labeled a predator, you're labeled a creep, whatever. So again, we can look at it from multiple perspectives. We can say, well, Arthur really is a creep, and she's justified in asking him to get out of the house. It's her house, he should leave the house. But then we see it from Arthur's perspective, where it's like, I've done nothing wrong. All of a sudden, the love of my life is telling me to leave. And he realizes that all those moments she was laughing with him, listening to his comedy, rubbing his back when his mother was dying. All of these moments he realizes were false and fake. And so again, there's a level in which, okay, he's a delusional guy, he has hallucinations, right? He has an alternate reality. But if we dip into his reality, what is the meaning of Arthur's experience? His experience is that I had a girlfriend who I thought was my loyal girlfriend, and then one day I figured out all of that was a lie, all of that was a deception, all of that was, I was her plaything, or I was, maybe I was her sugar daddy, maybe I was her support, maybe she saw me as a way to socially advance within a friend group or something. There are many different reasons why women will get into a relationship with a man, and it has nothing to do with their soulful connection to the man or the loyalty to the man. It has to do with some kind of temporary whatever. And sometimes the reason is just incomprehensible. They don't understand, you don't understand, but it's in one door, out the other, and it is there, and then it's not there, and you realize all of those moments, all of those memories, they're lost forever. You can't retrieve them, and when you look back on them, Arthur's looking back, and you see she's there and she's not there. She's there and she's not there. She's there in this delusion, this illusion, this mirage of a relationship, but then she's not there. And you realize she never was there. And that is symbolic, I think, of the emotional feeling of detachment that people have when they are going through this dating culture that we have now, where you're with one person and then you're not, and you're with another person, you're not. And this makes it very difficult to deal with the fact that you're forming attachments and then you're disattached, and you're attached and then you're disattached. And this detachment makes it very difficult to connect with people in general. And it leads to apathy, and it leads to depression, and it leads to a misery. So I guess when I look at this term incel, as I've talked about before, it is a very limited term because it implies that, this man is so ugly that not even a prostitute will have sex with him, or this man is so poor, he can't even get a prostitute to have sex with him, or something like that, which of course, not many of those guys exist. They are not politically relevant. They're not an important constituency. Very few of those people actually exist, if they exist at all. And we're not even talking about guys who can't get girlfriends. Again, it's not a question of can you get a girlfriend. It's can you have a relationship with someone of the opposite sex where you feel security. And prior to no-fault divorce, you could feel some sort of security. You could say, we're going to get married, and when we get married, essentially, we're stuck. There's no way out. Unless, in some cases, you'd say, well, if someone commits adultery, you can have a divorce, or something of this nature. Or if there's physical abuse, you can have a divorce, whatever. But there's some form of security that if we abide by certain rules, we're stuck together. And if one person falls out of love, well, that's too bad. You got to make it work. So there is a sense of security in relationships, that a man can have a woman can have a man, and they will be there for each other till death do them part. And there is a kind of security there, a kind of foundation, a kind of anchoring, that when I look at the what people really mean, I think when people use this term incel, it's a stupid term, it's a bad term, I hate that we even have to use it. But I think what really, the larger problem it is referring to is not a lack of sex. It is not a lack of relationships, necessarily. It is a lack of real relationships, of foundational relationships, stable relationships. And in a way, the larger incel culture is not just a culture of guys who are not sociable or not attractive or not wealthy or whatever the case may be. The larger incel culture is we, as a younger generation, we are a product of, in the majority, broken families. In the majority, it is now a minority of people who have some kind of stable, healthy, family that they're brought up in, which is cohesive, which is harmonious, etc., etc. I'm not to say people don't have disagreements or people don't get in arguments or something like that. But really, when we look at the bare minimum of what was considered in the past to be a healthy, stable environment, that is a minority experience now. Majority of people don't get to experience that. So when, again, I take this term incel and I blow it up and I say it is not a lack of sex, it is a lack of stability in human relationships. Then we are all incels, right? We are all incels because we live in a culture, we live in a society in which relationships are not stable. Your employer is not stable. We've gone from the concept of a career, that you enter into a company when you're young, you work your way up the ranks, and then you're set for life and you have your retirement. We've gone from that to you have to change your job every few years. And you have to change your city every few years because you have to go where the jobs are. And your family is broken up or you're far away from them and you maybe see them once a year or during the big holidays, which are more and more commercialized and to me become more and more disgusting. I hate to say it, loved Christmas as a kid, starting to get disgusted by the major holidays and the yearly commercialization of them and the way they come earlier and earlier. And, it's October, and we're seeing the Halloween, and we're seeing the Christmas too. And it's sickening. And it makes you want to just throw the whole thing in the trash. Very similar to what has been done to Christianity, where you look at the rainbow flag goes up in the Christian churches, and you see the signs that say no person is illegal. And again, maybe we even could understand those arguments on like a deeper ideological level, where we can say, okay, well, open borders is not the problem, the issue is X, Y, Z, or we could go over the finer points of human sexuality or whatever. But you just see the rainbow flag and you see the no person is illegal, and you realize that the church has been transformed in a radical way. And the church has been lost in a sense. The church has been co-opted for political purposes. And it is nothing more than a plaything of elites who are pushing their message on the masses through the church. So you realize that the church is, I think that's the bigger problem for me. Not that the church is paused or the church is what a degenerate or the church is leftist. That's not even the biggest problem. The problem is the church is not independent. The church does not have agency. And those moral values, which the church says are more important than whether you're Christian, atheist, Jew, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever, they say, oh, well, none of that matters. What matters, are you a good person? Do you help refugees? Do you worship the rainbow flag? Those are the core values. And so to replace Christ with the rainbow flag and to replace the cross with the refugees welcome, to see that transformation happen so fast, it gives you a sense of emptiness and nihilism that I guess the church never had any strength or power at all if it allowed itself to be co-opted so easily. Maybe it was evil from the start, or maybe it was good, but it was just weak and incapable of defending itself. Where was God in this situation? So there is a kind of a nihilism that comes in more generally. But to kind of reel it back in from this very depressing. But that's what the movie is about, right? The movie, the power of the movie, we might disagree with the message, we might oppose the movie, but I think the power of the movie, the reason why young people really like the movie, they're attracted to the movie, is because it's taking all these hidden humiliations that people feel that can't be expressed, right? And people can't say, I don't like living in a society where relationships are unstable and fake and superficial. You can't say that. You can't say that and people just say, okay, next, swipe left on that conversation. No one cares. But if you say, I'm an incel terrorist, then people start listening, right? So you've taken a legitimate problem, something that really is happening, and then no one listens, so then you have to condense this down into some parody, some caricature. There is no incel problem in America. There is a relationship problem in America and the wider Western world, which is the wider globalized world. This is a problem, but it has to be parodied as an incel problem, which totally misses the point, which is a distraction in the same way that, oh, gun violence, gun violence, gun violence. Well, what about car accidents? What about heart disease? Why do we care so much about gun violence? It's a parody of death. It is a parody of the fear of death. So we have all of these distractions, and I guess that's how the general humiliation problem, people feel humiliated. I say, I feel humiliated. No one listens. But if you you have an opening scene where a guy in a clown costume gets beaten up on the street by a gang. Now we can feel sympathetic. Now we can recognize the problem. But it's not the same problem, right? So there is kind of a bait and switch. There is a transference, a metaphorical journey that we're going through, and something is lost there. We still can't quite express what we really mean, and we have to do it through this. It was interesting as I was looking up Juvenal, the French writer Bertrand de Juvenal. I found a Roman writer named Juvenal, slightly different spelling, and he was someone who satirized Roman society. And there are these analyses of Juvenal, the Roman writer or poet or whatever he was, and they're saying, well, actually, he meant the opposite of what he was saying. So there's this concept that sometimes in a certain regime, in a certain cultural zone, you have to say the opposite of what you intend, and you have to put in like these little hints and these little inaccuracies or inconsistencies or glitches in the matrix in order to give a hint to the audience that maybe I don't mean exactly what I'm saying. Maybe I actually mean the opposite of what I'm saying, which is interesting. We think of irony, I guess, as a modern concept, as something new and contemporary, and I sometimes fall into that in my discussions of people as saying this is one of the defining characteristics of our contemporary culture. But you can see it in the Roman cultural period where there is satire, there is irony, there is sarcasm. So I always look at modernism, I always bring it back to the idea that modernism is not a product necessarily of technology, or it's not unique to our times, but it is, in a way, like a Spenglerian aspect of a cycle that we're going through, that we're reaching this certain point in a cycle. And so just as the Romans, we're entering into the period of irony and sarcasm, where nothing is genuine and everything is fake. So there is something cathartic. There is a self-pitying catharsis about watching a protagonist that you can identify with. You can say, yes, I feel his feelings. I sympathize with it. When he is beaten up, that is me. I feel that I am being beaten up. And it just continues throughout the movie. We could analyze every single scene in this vein and whatnot. But that is, I guess, the rebuttal. That is the rebuttal to the rebuttal. We don't support the film, but we also understand why people love the film. And the people who miss the boat on that, who miss the point and don't understand, I mean, you could say self-pity is a bad thing. You can say that this victimary narrative is bad. We shouldn't engage with that, whatever. Those might all be valid arguments, but at the end of the day, I think we still do have to recognize why this appeals to young people, and why things like this will continue to appeal to young people. Why things along this line will continue to be pushed. Why Pepe the Frog? I mean, Pepe the Frog, in a sense, is the Joker. I think now that the Pepe meme is kind of over with being co-opted by the Hong Kong protesters, the Pepe meme was like, again, if we say that the movie Creep is the musical form, and we say that the movie Joker is the cinematography form, then the mimetic form would be Pepe. Pepe is the sad frog. He is a loser. He is a creep. And people identify with that because, in a sense, they are not allowed to express or to point to, in a valid way, to say, I have been hurt in some way. There is a problem. We are not allowed to talk about the problem. We do not have the language to talk about the problem. If we try to talk about the problem, we are labeled a freak or a creep or something like this. Oh, well, I guess he just couldn't get laid. You know, I guess he just couldn't get laid, so that's why he did X, Y, and Z. When that is the most ridiculous parody or caricature of why most of these people, again, Elliot Rodger was not an incel. He was a narcissist. He had personality disorder. He didn't understand what was going on. He was socially awkward. But ultimately, he was arrogant. He felt he deserved something. He felt he deserved love from women, not sex. He felt he deserved love and admiration. He felt he deserved the adoration of women around him. And he wasn't getting it. And I think a lot of people feel they deserve something and they're not getting it. And this is where resentment comes from. So even if we disagree with resentment and we hate resentment, we think it's low class or whatever, however we describe it, I think we should still understand it. We should still understand the process. Certainly Hollywood understands. Certainly when Hollywood produces movies like this, Hollywood understands resentment. And Hollywood is profiting off that resentment. And Hollywood is directing that resentment through narratives towards certain outlets. Watch the Joker, buy this merch, watch this series, engage in this entertainment, join a mob, join a political movement, kill the rich, these sort of things, which I'm not so certain are solutions to any of these problems. And there are genuine problems, there are genuine grievances that are unable to be expressed without, again, people looking at you like you're a freak. And what do you do about that? I don't know. You make the Mr. Cool Mug podcast. That's what you do. So that's just a quick add-on, tacking that on. Maybe we'll have further developments as this thing unfolds in real time, where, we watch the movie. There was like some pre-reviews of the movie before we watch it. We watch the movie, we make our review, then more reviews, reviews responding to reviews. It's a dialogue, right? So we're considering putting out more interesting videos. We've got some things in the bag, and I'm not sure. It's difficult. It's difficult sometimes to decide, because there is an urge, I suppose. There is like an urge to just throw tomatoes at the wall and see which ones stick. And then there's like a perfectionist idea, which is like you have to create certain rules and certain expectations and certain familiarities that appeal to people. And on the other hand, you want it to be exciting, you want it to be new, you want it to be fresh. And it is hard, it is difficult to come up with new and fresh ideas and to be motivated and excited for the next episode. So it's always a challenge, but we love a challenge, right? We love a good struggle. We love a good struggle. One thing that was, I know I shouldn't bring up a new topic before I'm going to end the video, but I was just thinking about this whole transhumanism debate, and I was thinking, this is sort of like a bedtime thought as I'm about to dip my head off to sleep. I was thinking one of the appealing things about the concept of transhumanism is that humans are so self-contradictory. We want one thing, but then we want another thing, and those two desires are completely in conflict, like fundamentally in conflict. And it produces suffering. And the idea, so the idea that we want fast food, but fast food is not good for us. It makes us fat and lazy, and it causes all these problems. Okay, so why couldn't we just redesign humanity to only want healthy food? So we have like laser eye scanners, and we're scanning the food, and we're deciding which food is healthy or not. And we actually love healthy food. And when you eat that, you're eating that kale, it just tastes so good, it tastes so sweet. Sweetness is just a perception. So what if we could change our perception so that when we eat kale, we perceive it to be sweet? And when we eat sugar, we perceive it to be disgusting, right? What if we could change our perception of the world so that our desires matched up with what is really good for us? And that, to me, the idea of transhumanism providing that, internal harmony. We're no longer at war with ourselves. We no longer hate our own preferences. We no longer hate our own desires. We no longer have to be like the ascetic in the desert who's like, I shun women and I shun good-tasting food, and I'm going to wear itchy clothing, and all of these things that ascetics do. And I understand, I guess, the tradition in itself would say that, even if you could have transhumanism, this ascetic process would still be valuable because you're fighting against the will in the most basic sense. And, okay, we understand that on some deeper level, maybe. But at the very least, wouldn't it be nicer to live in a world where instead of having to deal with this internal should I get up out of bed in the morning? Should I be lazy, sleep in 5 more minutes? Should I study what I am supposed to study? Should I waste my time on entertainment I know I shouldn't waste my time on? All of these internal questions that we have is because there's this mismatch of incentives that we're constantly attracted to that which is new. We are constantly attracted to that which is bad for us, the sugars that are bad for us. And we understand through evolutionary psychology why we would be attracted to these things, because previously sugar was rare. Beautiful women were rare. You lived in a tribe, and all the women were pretty much paired up or taken, or it was a vital part of our survival, and sex equaled reproduction in a way that it doesn't today because of contraception. So it was a different environment in that respect. And so all of these things have changed with our environment. And now that which was rare has become abundant, and that which was abundant has become rare. There's this whole mismatching. And so we're constantly struggling against these ancestral signals that we have to do one thing, which in the modern sense doesn't really make sense. And we're constantly fighting ourselves. We're almost fighting our ancestors. We're going to war with our ancestors every single day in this respect. And that is very frustrating, and it is very demoralizing, and it leads to things like mental illness, and it leads to lives wasted and potentials wasted. And wouldn't it be great if we could somehow alter consciousness, whether that is a human consciousness or a post-human consciousness, to alter it to be better?